What if the thing that made you strong quietly made you anxious too? Some parenting red flags don't look loud. They don't look abusive. They don't even look wrong. They look normal. That's what makes them powerful. And before we go any further, this isn't about blaming parents. Most parents are doing the best they can with what they were given. But sometimes, the patterns we grow up with shape us in ways we don't fully understand until we're adults. Wondering why we overthink texts, fear disappointing people, or feel uncomfortable being happy. Let's talk about the parenting flags that don't break a child overnight. They shape them slowly. And we'll come back to why the strong kid often struggles the most. Flag number 1. Love that feels conditional. You only got warmth when you performed well. Good grades, good behavior, no trouble. If you disappointed them, the mood shifted. Silence, cold tone, subtle distance. No one said, "I love you less," but you felt it. This creates something called conditional validation. In simple terms, your brain learns love must be earned. So now as an adult, you hustle for approval. At work, in relationships, even with friends. You don't relax into love, you manage it. And here's the tricky part. On the outside, this child often becomes high-achieving, responsible, impressive. But internally, they're exhausted. Flag number 2. Emotions that weren't allowed. Maybe crying was called dramatic. Maybe anger was called disrespect. Maybe fear was called weakness. So you learned to shut it down. Psychology calls this emotional suppression. But let's say it plainly. You learned your feelings were inconvenient. Now fast forward. You struggle to name what you feel. You say, "I'm fine," automatically. You feel overwhelmed but can't explain why. Because no one modeled emotional regulation. You only learned emotional control. Regulation says, "I feel this and I can handle it." Control says, "I don't feel this." Those are not the same thing. And we'll come back to that difference. Flag number 3. Parentification. This is when the child becomes the emotional adult. You were the mediator, the therapist, the peacekeeper, the mature one. You knew which topics would trigger an argument. You adjusted your behavior to protect everyone else's mood. Sounds responsible, right? Here's the hidden cost. You grew up hyper-aware of everyone's emotions and disconnected from your own needs. This often creates adults who feel guilty resting, guilty saying no, guilty choosing themselves. Because somewhere deep down, your brain still believes your job is to manage the room. Flag number 4. Perfectionism disguised as high standards. Nothing was ever terrible, but nothing was ever enough either. There was always a better score, a better performance, a better sibling to compare you to. Comparison conditioning teaches your brain that worth equals ranking. So now you scroll social media and feel behind. You win something and immediately move the goalpost. Compliments bounce off you like rubber, because your nervous system never learned how to feel enough. Flag number 5. Unpredictable reactions. Maybe the rules changed depending on their mood. Maybe you never knew what version of them you'd get that day. When a child grows up with emotional inconsistency, they develop hypervigilance. That's just a fancy way of saying you became very good at scanning the room. You notice tone shifts instantly. You overanalyze messages. You assume tension means danger. It's not because you're dramatic. Your brain is trying to prevent surprise pain. Now here's something important. None of these patterns mean you're broken. They mean your nervous system adapted. Children are wired for survival and connection. If love feels unpredictable, they adapt. If emotions feel unsafe, they adapt. If approval feels conditional, they adapt. The problem is, the adaptations don't expire. You don't magically turn 18 and uninstall them. They follow you into dating, into work, into friendships, into money decisions, into how you talk to yourself. And here's the twist. The child who was labeled strong often becomes the adult who feels the loneliest. Because being the strong one meant you didn't get to be messy. You didn't get to fall apart. You didn't get to need. And when you grow up thinking your value is stability for others, asking for help feels like failure. Let's circle back to emotional control versus emotional regulation. Control shuts feelings down. Regulation says, I can feel this and still be safe. If you were taught control, learning regulation as an adult can feel uncomfortable. You might mistake vulnerability for weakness, boundaries for selfishness. But here's the reality. Healing doesn't mean blaming your parents. It means becoming conscious of what shaped you. So the question isn't, were they bad? The better question is, what did I learn about love, safety, and worth? Because whatever you learned can be unlearned, slowly, gently, intentionally. And if you see yourself in any of these patterns, you're not alone. You're not dramatic. You're not ungrateful. You're just becoming aware. And awareness is where power starts. If this resonated, like the video. It helps more than you think. Share it with someone who always says they're fine. And subscribe if you want more psychology explained in a way that actually makes sense in real life. Before you go, sit with this. If a child believes love must be earned, they grow up chasing it. If a child believes emotions are unsafe, they grow up hiding them. If a child believes their value is being strong, they grow up carrying everything alone. So when you re-watch this, notice which pattern made your chest tighten a little. Because sometimes the red flag that shaped you is the one you still call normal.